Have you ever wanted many more options for your D&D games? Well, this is the right place. Stick around. I'm going to be going through the 15 subclasses that I have released on DM's Guild for free and summarizing the core concepts and some of the mechanics of each. I realized that since I've created so many, it might be good to have a bit of a guide, at least for what I've created so far. I'll be posting links to these in the description of this video, or at least as many of them as I can fit, because I'm not quite sure of the YouTube character limit on the description, but should there not be all of them listed, that you should be able to find them via the links on my DM's Guild page regardless. But I've been creating subclasses for almost a year now. I started in January 2021, and as I said, I've made 15 now, one for every class, including Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter, and 2 for Paladin, because I don't play favorites at all, definitely not. So yeah, let's get into the list here. Before we jump into the subclasses, be sure to like and subscribe and post any opinion you have on these subclasses in the comments below. I'd love to hear what everybody thinks. And it's great to receive any support on this. It's really helped the channel grow, and it helps me really find out like what people want to see and what people want me to create in the future. So be sure to help the video out that way. Thank you very much, and let's get into it. The first subclass I created and the first subclass I ever published is called the Happy Wayfarer Ranger. This archetype is able to kind of go about life carefree of any worry or everyday stressors that many people would. And they specialize in terms of the actual gameplay of it in primarily being able to traverse both in and out of combat and being able to heal your allies and just generally help those around you. This inspired me to start creating content in the first place, as I just had an idea that I really wanted to try out. And I was inspired by a variety of things, including an old song called The Happy Wanderer and an episode of The Sopranos by the same name, which is my favorite episode. But yeah, no, I just thought that this archetype was kind of missing from the game, and I thought that it could be fun to explore, and I'm glad that I did, because it was what led me here. Second class, and still one of my favorite concepts I've ever come up with, is the Arcane Infection Sorcerer's Origin. These sorcerers have been infected with a magical disease or parasite that is somehow infusing their body with magical power. These sorcerers have an expanded spell list, similar to the sorcerers in Tasha's, and they're able to kind of manipulate poison and disease, and even get to the point of being able to positively infect your allies with your own disease to allow them to cast some of your spells and concentrate on them themselves. This archetype is fairly distinct from other sorcerer's origins, and I like the concept of a sorcerer who might not be entirely in control of their powers and be gaining it from perhaps a hostile source, or at least a deadly source. Next up is one of the weirder concepts that I've come up with. I've always seen builds of like, oh, what if you could make Magneto in D&D? And I always see sorcerers and things like that as the archetypes listed. My thought was a barbarian. The path of Magnesis barbarian finds the point between serenity and rage, as depicted by Charles Xavier in X-Men First Class, which is one of my favorite movies. And they're able to use their rage to generate magnetic fields that allow them to manipulate metal objects both on their own person or of their enemies or allies. They're able to empower their own strikes with magnetic force, or even, at a point, allow themselves to fly if they're wearing metal armor, which barbarians can do. I learned that in designing that subclass. But yeah, no, it's very much a defensive and utility-based barbarian archetype, which I thought was a fun idea, and I hope you would enjoy it. As a writer and as a designer, I love the inversion of tropes, and one example of that in my own work is the Lawman roguish archetype. Rogues are typically thought of as criminals. Thief was the original name for the class, but the Lawman is based around kind of traditional Western ideas, the like sheriff in many Western movies. So I've always thought that would be a rogue in if they were to be in a D&D class. However, I didn't really think that the class abilities fit that well. So the Lawman has certain abilities that allow them to gain sneak attack if their enemy knows that they're there, kind of an honorable duel type situation. In addition to that, they have expertise in certain like intimidation and persuasion in order to better convince the people that they're supposed to be protecting in some way. And additionally, they gain proficiency in firearms if they are allowed in your world. And if not, there are some other things to make up for that. But yeah, no, it's one of my favorites I've come up with so far. And it was inspired by a few characters in my previous home game, which was a ton of fun. The boundless self is my favorite idea that I've come up with, at least on a core concept level. These warlocks are in a pact with a future version of themselves, or a version of themselves in an alternate reality that has attained immense power. Because of this, they have gained power over reality itself, and it borrows a lot from Matt Mercer's Dunamancy rules, and those spells are what is on the expanded spell list for this warlock, in addition to abilities such as kind of gaining aspects of yourself from another dimension, allowing those to kind of bolster your resolve or even come back from death at a high level. But it presents really interesting roleplay opportunities, particularly being your own patron and seeing what certain paths may belie in your character's future. I'm a teacher by trade, so I was always kind of disappointed that 5e didn't have any real teacher subclass or class option. That's why I created the College of Education Bard. In my eyes, a teacher's primary job is to inspire passion in their students, and these bards are able to do the same thing. They are able to essentially impart skills on their party members and allow them to kind of perform better both in and out of combat through learning. And it's just something that I really have a soft spot for as an educator, and I hope that I'm able to come up with similar ideas to this in the future. Touching on my favorite class now, the Oath of Undoing is a paladin that works against law itself. Similar to the Lawman rogue, it's a bit of an inversion of the established tropes, but these paladins work to undo unjust systems of government and unjust laws. And they particularly have abilities that kind of liberate those around them, allowing them to move more freely. And really, it's just focused on the ideals of freedom and being able to attain that for yourself and for others through working against the law, sort of a Robin Hood type situation. But it's showing kind of an inversion of the lawful good paladin, and these would probably tend more chaotic good. There is much that lurks beyond the minds of mortals. Depth Domain clerics worship entities that lurk on the fringes of reality, either in murky ocean trenches or in the far reaches of the astral sea. Deities that these clerics could worship include Gunadar, Dendar, Tharizdun, Thassa, and Uk'otoa, as well as Umber Lee. These clerics are essentially very damage-focused in their build potential, and I thought it'd be interesting to have more of a striker cleric than we currently have in 5th edition. As they're currently great tanks, great healers, and can really do everything else. I thought that something that maybe didn't focus as much on healing would allow for some unique opportunities, both in terms of roleplay and in terms of gameplay. So yeah, Depth Domain is very good, especially if you're doing a nautically themed campaign. So is a classic argument that Aragorn is a ranger with a sword and Legolas is a fighter with a bow. And this next subclass I designed to prove that. The Bowmaster, martial archetype for the fighter, is a fighter that gains the ability to essentially perform different maneuvers with arrows. Kind of similar-ish to the Battlemaster. However, this isn't a resource per se. Your resource is your attacks. You can spend a certain number of attacks to do certain shots. You could tether an arrow to an enemy. You could fire multiple times with a single one, perhaps making it more inaccurate but dealing more damage. Really, there's a variety of different skills and tactics that these Bowmasters can employ, and by using these different types of arrows and types of attacks, they're able to wildly vary their style rather than just sitting back with a bow and doing the same damage every turn. So yeah, I thought that would be a fun way to vary it up from a traditional ranger with a bow. Malar, the god of the hunt, was one of the main villains of my last home game, and the Druid Circle of the Hunt is designed to follow his lead. These Druids were designed to be as offense-focused as the Moon Druid is defense-focused. They're able to use their wild shape in order to turn themselves into natural predators and natural weapons. Because of this, they're able to kind of more be frontliners, whereas traditional druids tend to either stick in the back or just absorb damage in like a giant constrictor snake form if you're a moon druid. But I thought it'd be interesting to have more of a martial druid that is able to take definitive melee action on their own without any assistance. Into the final 5, Draconic Scholar. This was very much inspired by Fizzbands, though Fizzbands wasn't out yet when I released this. Draconic Scholars are wizards that gain their power through researching dragons and their arcane connection to the weave and their influence therein. Particularly, it's similar to the Totem Warrior Barbarian in that the subclass has choices within it that you can choose from. You can choose chromatic dragons, which help your damaging spells. You can choose metallic dragons, which defensively aid you and your allies. Or you can choose gem dragons, which help you move throughout the battlefield. And get kind of psionic type abilities with that last one as well. But it's fun because you kind of mix and match them, so no two Draconic Scholars would be the same per se. But yeah, no, Draconic Scholar is a fun idea that I was happy how it turned out. The Monk Way of the Single Blow is by design one of the most straightforward subclasses I've ever created. It is a monk that is able to give up attacks to make one singular attack much more devastating at any given point. So rather than a monk doing typical 4 or 5 attacks in a round, they could turn it all into one super powerful attack that is able to either completely debilitate an opponent or it'll miss and it'll do nothing for a round. The common comparison is One Punch Man, which I've actually never seen. But yeah, no, I thought it would be interesting to kind of invert the many, many small attacks of a monk into a single devastating hit. Getting into the more recent releases with the final 3, the Biologist Artificer subclass is a scientist who studies and forms an arcane connection with the natural world itself. They are able to essentially adapt to various environments, either by giving themselves terrain boosts, like being able to swim or fly in certain environments, or resisting heat or cold for deserts or tundras. These artificers are able to adapt to nearly any situation. The Oath of the Occult was a very Halloween-themed subclass. These paladins have sworn a vow to a hag or some other powerful occult entity, and in exchange, they've gained the ability to hex their opponents. Particularly, my favorite ability of theirs is any enemy within a 5-foot aura of them gets a d4 subtracted from any saving throw or attack roll they make, similar to the Bane spell. Additionally, they have various ways to kind of repel humanoids or a variety of other interesting channel divinities. Also, I should note that the art for this subclass is done by one of my wonderful players, goes by @LuckyGoblin on Twitter, so you should check her out there. Yeah, it's one of my favorite subclasses recently. Last but not least, the Order of the Iconoclast Blood Hunter. These Blood Hunters work against the influence of the divine in any of its forms. Particularly, they work to root out any evil deities or any deities they see as evil. Particularly in that the prime material plane has been influenced and harmed by deities for many, many years. And they aim to just remove that entirely, as they think that the world will be better off without it. Particularly, they have abilities to stop enemies from healing, and they have their own ways to heal themselves and their allies so they don't have to depend on the healers around them being divinely influenced. Particularly, it was so fun to design for the Blood Hunter. I just have to give major props to Matt Mercer in that it's a really fun class. And this was inspired by a Blood Hunter in my last campaign as well, who went by the name of Ursula, who was very much working against the gods by the end. And I thought it would be interesting to have an archetype that would be resolving around that idea in itself. All of these subclasses are available for free in the description below. Please feel free to check it out, and I really look forward to hearing anybody's thoughts. You can either leave them in the comments or otherwise just leave a comment on the DMs Guild page. But thank you all very much for watching and for all of your support so far. If you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, all those things I'm supposed to say, I think. And yeah, I'm probably not going to have a video this coming week because of Thanksgiving and everything, but look out after that. There'll be a lot more coming. Thank you very much.